Okay, so the big, beautiful bill has passed. What's in it? What's important? And is it really going to help you? Well, that's the real question now. I have a few things to say on this. But let's kind of go over some bullet points. CBS News has one here, and I kind of want to go over some of what they say. It's a little CBS-y. I have my issues with CBS, but that's just one thing. Anyway, Medicaid restrictions. There are some. Excuse me. But most of those restrictions, they're like, oh, Trump's cutting Medicaid. It's going to be the worst thing ever. Well, not in the sense that anyone's going to really disagree with it. It requires able-bodied adults to go to work to get it. You can't just sit at home anymore if you're physically able to go do it. I think just about all of us agree with that. If you can't just sit around, get paid by the government if you are able to go work. That's not fair. It really isn't. So people have a problem with that. I don't see why. They're really trying to sell that as him cutting stuff, but it's just not. Homeland Security is going to build a wall. I mean, is that really a surprise? They do have a minimum fee for seeking asylum. That's weird to me. You have to have $100 to seek asylum. Honestly, I don't think that should be there ever. I mean, it was $1,000, which I guess it could be worse. Because the House, I think, wanted to make it $1,000. I'm like, you're seeking asylum. You literally probably are showing up with the clothes on your back. So how are you gonna have $100 on you? I think that's stupid, but that's government for you. The state and local tax deduction. I'm not an accountant, but from my understanding, that is basically you can deduct the taxes you pay to your state to an extent. It helps with the blue states, not so much the red states that have low taxes. Like I said, I'm not an expert on that, but it might be helpful to some people. Restrictions on food stamps. Yeah, these are. I know people who have used food stamps who didn't need them. Very much didn't need them. I'm not going to really go into too many details about who it was and what they used them for, but it's very easy to game the system. And they weren't doing anything they weren't allowed to do. And it's not like they were breaking the law. It's just the law allowed them to do this. And I'm like, this kind of sucks if people are actually starving, but you're just out here buying whatever because you don't actually need it. There's some error rates that the states are going to have to pay taxes or pay fees for if they don't, look out for people that are able to work and qualify for SNAP and don't go to work. They're going to cut that down. I think that's a good thing as well. Same as the Medicaid thing. If you're able to go work, you should be working. And if you just don't make enough, jobs aren't out there, hey, this helps. But that's just not fair otherwise. Addressing the debt limit. Yeah, this does not address the debt limit. This just makes it worse. There's no way. There's no way you can sell it any other way. The child tax credit. Now this is interesting here, it's interesting for one reason. I don't think anyone's gonna argue this is a bad idea. It's a good idea. It helps families have more kids. It's expensive having children. Worth it. It increases the tax credit for children to $2,200. I believe the House version wanted $25 is what they say here. That's great. I've read the bill. In fact, this is it right here. It should be showing up on screen here. Yeah, here we go. So this is the bill where it talks about the tax years, and it says, $2,200 subsection shall be increased by amount equal to the cost of living adjustment. So they're trying to tie this to inflation. Not a bad idea. And there's rules on how the multiplication works, and that requires you to be a citizen. Yeah, duh. But this is what PBS says about it. It would boost the child tax credit to $2,200. Millions of families at lower income levels would not get the full credit. They don't say why. They don't say how that is. They just say that they won't get it. I can't find that in here where there's a restriction on, oh, if you make, less than 20 grand a year, you're not getting anything. Maybe it's somewhere else in the tax code that I'm not aware of. Like I said, I'm not an accountant, but that's just bad reporting. If you don't, they don't say why, they don't say how, they just say, this is bad. And it's bad on the one thing that most people, Republicans and Democrats, would agree is probably a good thing. There's a whole debate about whether tax credits actually help increase population growth. That's usually found to be false. It doesn't really help as much as people want it to. Japan's a great example of why it doesn't work. Now, let's go back to CBS, though, because they have a little better version of this. Limits on overtime and tips deductions. They call it that. It's really not a limit at all. It's an introduction of overtime and tip deductions, not a limit. So I don't know why they say that. And ironically, helps the poor. Another House measure, meanwhile, I'm sorry. The Senate proposal limits the deduction to $25,000. I think that's not terrible. It prevents extremely rich people from using it as well. I got tipped at a restaurant. I can't explain it. I could see where people could abuse the system. So capping it, I understand why the Senate did that. The Senate bill basically says if you make over $150,000, or couples who make over $300,000 won't qualify at all for it, or it starts dropping. Makes sense if you're that rich. If you're a waiter making that much money, you're doing good. Maybe you don't need any help. Just saying. So not a bad thing. I did not see an overtime version of this. Maybe it's there. The standard deduction, they just try to expand it, that you've been using for years. It was supposed to expire this year. No, it's not. It only expired. They only added like 3 more years to it. So, excuse me. They should have made that longer. That standard deduction is great. Basically, I don't even itemize anymore my deductions because it's just not worth doing. With that standard deduction being so high, it's pointless for me to try to do all that. I wish I could give as much as the standard deduction has. Let me compare CBS to PBS though. Let's see if they write anything else differently here. Money for deportations. You can tell who's leaning more. I will give CBS the win on this one. They're a little less biased. They still are. They all hate Trump. I don't know why. To be fair, I've been around for a long time, and I remember when the news hated Bush, and people look at Bush now and think he's the greatest president that's been best Republican president since Reagan or whatever. Actually, he's the only other one really, so I guess that would make him the best, but by their definition. Nice guy, not the greatest president. I'll go nice guy. Started a bunch of wars that probably didn't need to be done, but in his mind, I think he thought he was doing the right thing. I don't think he actually was trying to be a dictator or mean guy. Anyway, off topic. They go into Medicaid and the same thing I've been talking about, how they're cutting Medicaid because they wouldn't qualify because they have to go to work. It's just crazy. There is a few cuts for the clean energy stuff. I think there's cuts for methane emissions, things like that. Trump savings accounts, those are kind of neat. I think it's a great idea. $1,000 for, and I've covered this before in a previous video. $1,000 for children born. Depending on which version of the bill passed, I could not find this in the bill. It's in here somewhere, but it's like 800 pages, so I have not read the whole thing. Billions would go to the Artemis moon mission for the exploration of Mars. Awesome. I'm pretty sure Elon Musk should be happy about that, but probably won't be. They hate each other right now for some reason. But yeah, that's basically what they're reporting here. Okay, it's PBS is worse. They are using language that is definitely more biased, more partisan. I just don't. I'm not. I haven't been a fan of the mainstream news in a long time. I use Daily Mail more often than not, and they're a British newspaper. I just don't. I don't trust people. But the bill sounds pretty good. It does raise the debt ceiling. It does cost more money. The government gets away with it, and I had this explained to me a long time ago. I don't remember if I think I was in high school in my government econ class, and it was an interesting way to explain it. Excuse me. The government will basically overspend every year. They spend more than they take in, and I don't think we've ever really had a year since the 90s where that hasn't happened. And it works like this. It's basically like you maxing out all your credit cards, knowing you can't make the payments on your current salary, but next year's salary is going to be a little bit more, and you can make the payments then. Just the payments, though. You'll never be able to pay it off. But you can make the minimum payment and keep going. And that's what the government's basically doing. Now, our government's a little different than you. They can print money and not get arrested for it. And since everyone accepts the dollar as the de facto world currency, they can print pretty much as they want and get away with it. Inflation was bad in the past few years because Trump and Biden printed a lot of money. Biden printed a whole lot of money. It just got worse and worse every time. Trump did it, and then, oh, that's a good idea. And Biden was like, let's add a couple trillion on top of that. Yeah, that's a great idea. And that's why you got the inflation you did. But considering how much was printed, I expected inflation to really be worse than it was. And it just didn't happen. I was expecting, 20, 30, 40% inflation based on how much we printed. Printing being loosely defined, depending on how you word printing. They used to call it, what was the word? Quantitative easing, I think, was the word they used to use. Yeah, it's basically printing money without saying printing money. Back then, they didn't say it. Now they say it out loud, and people are like, oh, that makes sense. No, it doesn't. But if any country can get away with printing money, it's the United States. That's what I'm saying. And we proved that in the last 5 years. Inflation was bad, but it wasn't the end of the world inflation that it should have been. And that just shows you how strong the U.S. dollar really is, and that you can screw around with it and probably get away with it. But hey, that's a little off topic, but inflation is one of my things. I went to school for business and econ stuff, so I like that kind of stuff. I'm boring. Anyway, what do you guys think? Anything in the bill you like, you don't like? Am I wrong? Did I miss something? Let me know. Have a blessed day.